Hello and welcome to another lecture on managing the supply chain. Today we are focusing on demand forecasting in a supply chain. So in this lecture, you will understand the role of forecasting. So why actually forecasting matters and how supply chains rely on forecasting for making a variety of decisions. We will also talk about factors that influence demand forecasting specifically, and also some methods that companies are using these days for doing their demand forecasting. We will then talk about sales and operations planning, S&OP process, which is directly getting demand forecasting as the input and help supply chains to manage their long-term, mid-term, and short-term decisions. Let's start with a party. So let's say that you are throwing a birthday party for this upcoming weekend. You need to figure out how many guests you're gonna have and then decide about the food, snacks you're providing in your party. Since it is just a few days away, then you can ask your friends to RSVP. So some gonna say yes, I'm gonna say no. A few might say maybe. And then you realize the number of guests and then you provide food and snacks for them. Now imagine you're throwing a party a year from now for your next year's birthday. And you're asking your friends, hey, I'm gonna throw a birthday party next year. Uh, would you come to my birthday party? There might be a lot of maybes in that case because we are talking about a long term and people don't know exactly what's gonna happen that day. So the same thing happens with businesses as well. When a business is making decisions for their day-to-day or weekly operations, it's much more easier for them to do so because of the level of uncertainty. But when we are talking about future, long-term future, maybe long-term decision making, mid-term decision making, we encounter more uncertainties, and therefore it's much more difficult to exactly know what's going to happen. So, in businesses, basically, let's say that the producer of those snacks, they do demand forecasting. People like you, when throwing party, they're gonna go and purchase these snacks. So, businesses use customer behavior trends, uh, past information, past data on sales, and many more actually based on the upcoming events. Maybe there is a um, um, you know Super Bowl weekend coming up, and that's gonna increase the demand for snacks. So based on all these, um, businesses decide about how many units of products they should produce and have it shipped and ready in retail stores. So again, customer behavior changes all the time, and that's where seasonality patterns also matter. So specifically in case of food and snacks, again, sometimes there's a trend, people on social media talking about eating healthy, and then suddenly people decide not to eat chips and snacks anymore. But maybe there are some sports events around, and then people decide to, have some kind of snacks in their party. So all these customer behavior and seasonality trends gonna affect actually demand forecasting for all these businesses. But what is a forecast and why actually it matters in supply chains? So, a forecast is basically an estimation about something that's going to happen in future. Um, we might do a forecast on demand, meaning that how many units we estimate our customers going to purchase. Or we can do a forecast on supply, So how many units of raw material we can actually supply so that we can have our products ready to go for our customers. And also we can forecast the price. So price forecasting happens all the time in the supply chains, starting with the raw material price, going through the final product price. All the service providers are providing, such as distribution, transportation, inventory operations, and so on. So always there's a price forecasting for businesses in different stages of the supply chain. For this lecture specifically, we're going to focus on demand forecasting. Usually, the most important part of forecasting for a supply chain is demand forecasting. Based on even demand forecast, supply forecast will be affected and price forecast will be affected. So we are focusing on this for today. So, why we are doing demand forecasting? Because demand forecasts will be the first and most important step in figuring out the capacity of production and all the resources actually we need for the production. If it is a service supply chain, is still demand forecasting for the number of customers and expected sales will be the first step. So let's assume a hospital. So in this hospital, there are surgeons, nurses, doctors, working staff. They do have supplies, obviously, that they need, and they have patients that come in. Sometimes they're walk-in, sometimes scheduled patients. But again, they need to schedule all the staff. They need to figure out all the resources they need for running things smoothly in the hospital. So actually, hospitals do demand forecasting as well. So it's not just for businesses who are offering products. Other organizations like hospitals in healthcare systems also do demand forecasting. So why do they do demand forecasting? First of all, they need to decide about their long-term operations, the capacity they can operate on. So, for example, if they are building a new hospital or expanding their hospital, they would like to know how many beds are needed, how many operating rooms are needed, and how many equipments are needed in that center. For midterm decision making, they also use demand forecasting outputs. For example, how many doctors, nurses, specialists are needed in that building. And also, obviously, deciding about the capacity in terms of assigning basically equipments as well as the staff to upcoming patients. And also short-term operations. So every single medical supply is being used eventually in the hospitals, right? So it is important to understand actually how much inventory to keep of those supplies and how many units of these inventories are being spent every single day or weekly in the day-to-day operations. So demand forecast will be the input for all of these decisions. So that's why forecasting is the first step before making any long-term, mid-term, or short-term decision in a supply chain. So even we can look at demand forecasting through push and pull supply chains. If you remember, we talked about this before. So we are going back to the concept of push and pull processes. So it doesn't matter if the operations are push or pull in a supply chain. So if you remember, the push processes are when um, we try to get ready to some extent before customer orders come in. So, for example, we have raw materials ready to go. If there's any order, that we have them in stock, we have them in inventory. So even for having those raw materials ready, we need customer demand forecast. The same with pull processes. So pull processes are when we wait for the customer orders to come in, and then based on the number of orders, we do um, basically the operations, right? But still, we need that raw material to be ready to go for the customization. So again, forecasts help us to be ready, assuming that there is a trend that's happening, and we can actually, to some extent, know how many customers gonna walk in, have some good estimate of what's gonna future look like for the business. So it doesn't matter if operations are on push or pull side, it's still demand forecasting will be the first step before doing anything in the supply chain. Let's consider an example here, Home Depot. So if you walk into Home Depot and want to purchase paint, you will see that they have these large actually inventories of very few colors of paint available in the store. And then what they do when a customer walks in with a specific requirement of a specific color, then they actually prepare it in this store. So there are a part push processes, a part pull processes, but it's still Home Depot does a lot of demand forecasting to figure out the amount of plain paint to have in the store, and also anticipation of how many customers gonna walk in for specific colors of paint in the center. So let's check what you learned so far in this lecture. I have 3 questions here for you. I want you to pause this video, think about the questions, and then you can find the answers in the next slide. First question, what are the 3 types of forecasts organizations commonly use? If you remember, we talked about 3 categories of forecasts. What are they, and why do you think companies need actually to work on these kind of forecasts? Why does Home Depot need a forecast even for a pool type product like customer paint? So think about it. Again, distinguish between pull and push processes, and then why demand forecasting is important for everything. And then name 2 product categories where forecasting is especially difficult and explain why. So every single product that you use daily, every single service that you use daily has a supply chain. It is not possible to not have a supply chain for a product. So if there is a product, there is a supply chain. Look around you. Find out at least 2 different products and think about their supply chain and think about their demand forecasting. Do you think there is any kind of uncertainty for the manufacturer, for the service provider, when they are offering you that product or service? Sometimes the uncertainty is really high. Things are changing fast. Sometimes uncertainty is low. Things are not changing that fast. So distinguish between these 2 categories and explain your findings.